Okay, section 1-3 talks about weekly time cards. We're still talking about getting paid on an hourly basis. We talked about straight time, overtime. How do we keep track of the time? Typically, it's with some sort of time card situation. And I don't care if the time card is electronic or if it's just a big punch machine. It's up to you to make sure you have the right time. And if you find yourself in a situation where you have to calculate the time worked by hand, you got to do it accurately, and it happens all the time still, even in this age of computerization. So let's make sure we get to handle this. And a lot of people are going to tune out because they think this is some easy skill that they can just do in their head. But trust me, there are some tricks that might uh, mess you up. So pay attention here. First off, let's take a look at the time card situation. Uh, we know a weekly time card. Well, you might not know. A weekly time card is something that is typically right near the door of your where you're going to go work, and you're going to take it out of a slot that has your name on it and literally put it in a clock, and it will punch what time you've come in. And then when you leave for lunch, or if you leave at the end of the day, you put it in the clock and it will punch what time you got out, and it records it. It's up to us to decide how much time we worked based on that time card to figure out what our pay is. Oftentimes, we will not have a nice, accurate time, and we don't really usually pay by the minute. It all kinds of averages out. So, what we're going to do is we're going to round to the nearest quarter hour if we don't work an entire hour, and that our total hours is just the sum of the daily hours. Let's jump in and see how this looks. Down here in example 1 is how a typical time card might look, and it really is. This is for Gail. And I want to focus in. Well, let's first look at Monday. She clocked in at 8:15 and she clocked out for lunch at 12:15. Well, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's pretty easy. 8:15, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 4 hours. Simple enough. So she worked 4 hours in the morning and she worked from 1 till 5. Do that. That's 4 hours in the afternoon. She worked 8 hours. Simple enough. And oftentimes it is just that simple. Let's take a look at what happened on Thursday, though. She clocked in at 8:15 and left at 1:45, and then she clocked back in for after lunch at 2:15, and she clocked out at 4:59. Now you can do this in your head, and they'll probably get away with it, but I want to show you how to um, do it accurately by hand using simple math, and this is how you subtract and figure out time by hand. Now pay attention. You might have to actually watch this twice. First off, always, whenever you're subtracting numbers, you always put the biggest number on top and the littlest number on the bottom. Well, that's the same way we do it with time. But with time, the biggest number is always later in the day. We don't care what number it is. The later in the day time is the bigger number. So let's figure out what time, how much she worked in the morning by hand here, actually using math. So the bigger number is 1:43 because it's later in the afternoon, or it's later in the day. 8:15 is a smaller number. So I'm going to go 1:45 minus 8:15. I know this looks a little bit wacky, but it's not too hard. These are times, so we just don't want to get too confused on this. Now, any time that you have a situation like this and the number goes past 12 and we can't hardly add, it's simple. All we do is we add 12 to this number. So I'm going to, before I even get started, I'm going to say 1 plus 12 is 13, and I'm going to change this 1 to a 13. And now let's just do some simple subtraction. 5 minus 5 is 0. 4 minus 1 is 3. And 13 minus 8 is 5. She worked 5 hours and 30 minutes in the morning. In the afternoon, she clocked in at 2:15 to 4:59. So 4:59 is the bigger number. And 2:15 is the smaller number. In this case, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to go 9 minus 5 is 4, 5 minus 1 is 4, and 4 minus 2 is 2. I need to add these two up. So I'm going to, this is how much she worked in the AM. This is how much she worked in the PM. So now I'm just going to add these two numbers together. She worked 5 hours and 30 minutes in the morning. She worked 2 hours and 44 minutes in the afternoon. She worked a total of 7 hours and 74 minutes that day. Some of you are going to say, hey, that looks a little bit strange. And sure it does. Of course, there's 60 minutes in every hour. So if it goes over 60, I'm just going to put a 1 over here. I'm going to subtract 60 from 74. And that's going to be 14. And I'm going to add 1 here. This is actually 8 hours and 14 minutes. And we're going to round. So we're going to say she worked 8 hours and a quarter, because we rounded to the nearest quarter hour on Thursday. Is that what they got? Yeah, that's what they got here, 8 hours and a quarter. Okay? Simple stuff, not a problem. Let's take a look at one that's just a little bit different. I want to take a look at Friday's number here. It brings up the other tricky part in subtracting. And I'm just going to do the morning one, probably. I got 1220 minus 830. So let's see how we do that one. I got 1220 minus 830. Okay? 1220 is the bigger number because it's later in the day. And all of a sudden we go, hold the phone, we have a problem. 20 minus 30, we can't do that. Well, in this case, we have to borrow. But when we borrow using time, we're going to borrow an hour. So I'm going to change the 12 to an 11. And I can't just put 1 over here. There's 60 minutes in an hour, so I'm going to change to 20. I'm going to add 60 minutes to that. 20 plus 60 is 80. And now I'm going to go 80 minus 30, which is that 50. And now 11 minus 8 is 3. She worked 3 hours and 50 minutes in the morning. With me on that? Let's take a look at Friday afternoon. And Friday afternoon, she clocked out at 5 to 12:50. 5 o'clock minus 12:50. Now this looks really strange. Don't let us fool you. 5 o'clock is the bigger number. So this is pretty simple. We're going to do it exactly like we did in the last one. First off, I'm going to add, now let's go ahead and add 12 first. It doesn't matter what order I'm going to add this on. So I'm going to add 12 to this. I'm going to change the 5 to a, adding 12, 17. 5 plus 12 is 17. And over here, now I have to borrow again. So I'm going to change this 17 down to a 16. Hopefully you guys are following me that. And I'm going to add an hour on this side. I can't just add a 1. It's 60 minutes. So I'm going to add a 60 here. And now I think I'm good to go. 0 minus 0 is 0. 6 minus 5 is 1. 6 minus 2 is 4. 1 minus 1 is 0. So 4 hours and 10 minutes. Let's see if we can get the right answer from the book. In the morning, she worked 3 hours and 50 minutes. In the afternoon, she worked 4 hours and 10 minutes. 4 plus 7 hours and 60 minutes. Let's see, 7 hours and 60 minutes. That sounds a lot like 8 hours to me, doesn't it, to you? She worked 8 hours even. Let's see if the book has 8 hours. Yes, it does. So just to recap, anytime that we have to find out at lapse time, if you can't do it by hand or in your head or are uncomfortable with it, it's pretty simple skills to do. Always make sure that you know the later time in the day is for sure the bigger number. And if it looks a little bit wacky, sometimes you got to add a 12, which is fine in order to make it work. And if you have to borrow, you borrow an hour and you add 60 minutes. Go ahead and watch this tape again if you need to. And move on to your homework assignments in the book. And good luck figuring out weekly time cards.